Uno, dos, 1, 2, 3, 4. ¡Eh! ¡Pule, pule! Watch it now, watch it! Here it come, here it come! Watch it now, he gets you! Matty told Hattie about the thing she saw. That two big horns.
We love Henrietta Hawes. It's the nicest school because it is mine and it is yours. We love Henrietta Hawes.
The place where Hawes is now was at one point a garbage dump for the farms in the area. The next to the dump was an area carved out for a small airport in the 1940s. When the houses were needed, the airport was torn down and houses went up.
Soon enough, with all the houses, a school was needed for the kids. In 1964, the town decided it was time to build a school on Stevens Ave. At the time, it cost the town $475,000 to build the school. By 1965, the school was finished and a name was chosen, Henrietta Hawes School.
That's right, Henrietta Hawes, who the school is named after, is a real person, and she was actually a great woman. She was one of the first women to get a college education in New Jersey, and she's also the first woman to ever be on the Ridgewood Board of Education. Now, a woman getting a college education might not seem very exciting nowadays, but when she did it, it was really monumental. Because you have to understand, Henrietta Hawes was born in the 1860s. She was born right after we fought the Civil War. She was born right after Abraham Lincoln was our president. So that'll give you an idea of how long ago it was.
To show her honor, she helped seal up the final cornerstone in the school. Inside it, she and the members of the Board of Ed put a time capsule which included, at that time, a map of the school, some coins from 1965, a newspaper, some articles about Mrs. Hawes, as well as some other items.
School started in 1966, and students in grades K through 4 attended the school. In addition to the classrooms, there was the gym, health room, and offices, but not much else. As the neighborhood started to grow, the school grew too, and in 1974, an addition was added onto the school to include classrooms for grades 4 through 6, a music room, art room, and library. The classrooms had movable walls in them, so the classrooms could be combined. 6th grade did not last too long in Hawes, and pretty soon after it was only grades K through 5.
In 1986, students and teachers from Glen School started to come to Hawes. In the late 90s, the movable walls were taken down. The solid walls were installed. Finally, in 2012, construction was completed on the last part of the school, which includes classrooms and a second courtyard. Hawes has been filled with students and teachers since the 1960s. To give us a better idea of how times have changed or not changed, students and teachers were interviewed and asked questions to see how their answers compared. Students were asked what they used their phone for, and teachers were asked what a phone was like to them as a child.
We used to have a phone that was attached to the wall, and every time I would talk on it, it had like this giant wiry cord, and I'd always get like tangled in it.
I play games and listen to music. And how do you play the games? I just press the app and I play the game.
Well, it was kind of big. It was about this big. It was black. It had the receiver went across the front, and you had to dial with your finger. There were no push buttons or anything like that, and you couldn't move it. It had to stay in one place, so you had to stay where the phone was if you were making a phone call.
I have an iPhone, which is a touchscreen device that you can call or text on, and you can also play games or apps.
So a phone was a touch-tone thing that hung on the wall, and it had a really, 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 really long twisty cord that you could walk all around the house with.
Play games and do Facebook and other stuff.
A phone to me was a way to call my friends or my family members. I remember calling my grandparents quite often. The funny thing is, since we had no way to program the phone numbers, we had to memorize them.
Students would ask how they watched TV, and teachers would ask what a TV was like for them as a child.
I use a television and I have remotes and I press the buttons to put on the channel.
It was a screen, and it was in, like we called it a console. It was in a longer box. It usually had a record player with it. And TVs had dials. You had to get up. There was no remote control. You had to get up and you had to change the dial. We had 13 channels. That was it.
I usually use Netflix.
When I was growing up, we really only had about 11 channels, and most of the time the shows I watched were sitcoms on Channel 5 or Channel 11. I especially enjoyed Batman.
I turn on a remote and I press the on button and then I press the numbers of the channel that I want.
A TV was a big brown box in my mom's living room that had legs on it, and we would have to push the button and it would go whoa, and then it would turn green for about 5 minutes and we had to wait for the screen to come on.
There's a lot of buttons and you press the red button.
I would watch TV with my family every Friday night around 8 o'clock. We would put on the TV. We had about 20 channels. We did have a remote, so we could change the channel with the remote. We didn't have to go up to the TV. But there was no fast forwarding. We had to watch everything in real time, and if you missed a show, you were out of luck.
Students were asked what they used to listen to music, and teachers were asked how they listened to music when they were a child.
We had a record player in my house, and we had records which were like discs that had music recorded on them, and you would put a needle from the record player actually onto the record. So when I was a kid, the songs that I would like would come out in 45. They were little records, and we would put them on the record player and just play one song at a time.
Sometimes I use my iPad and I click in the app and you click the music you want.
Well, first of all, we would listen to music on the radio. But most of the music stations were actually on AM radio. So I remember listening to WABC Music Radio on the AM dial. If we bought music, we usually bought music on record albums.
The internet. What is your favorite song? Uptown Funk.
I was a child in the 90s and I had cassette tapes, and my favorite cassette tape was my Spice Girls cassette tape, and it was about a little tape this small. And I would put it in a cassette tape player, close the player, press play. Spice Girls would be jamming out in my house. And then a couple years later, CDs came out, like little disc things, and I would put that in a CD player, and same music, but just different form.
I use my Chromebook, my phone, my iPad mini, a normal iPad, or the radio.
The record player had an arm with a needle on it. Sometimes the needle could break and you had to replace the needle. Sometimes it would skip over the album and scratch your album. That was never fun.
My Chromebook or my Kindle Fire, like I go on YouTube and listen to some music.
Well, when I was a young child, I would listen to tapes, and my friends and I would always make mixtapes. When I got older, in middle school, I got my first CD, and at that time it was so cool. My parents got me a Discman for Christmas, and so my first CD, I remember, was LL Cool J, and I was so excited. You take the CD and you put it in the Discman, and then you put on your headphones and you walk around carrying it, and you felt so cool.
Students were asked what they used to play games or video games, and teachers were asked how did they play games or video games as a child. You go on a TV and play video games or a phone.
Well, we didn't have video games, but we loved to play games. Board games were very big in my house. We played Monopoly, we played Clue, we played Scrabble.
I usually use my computer.
I saved up my money and I bought an Atari system so that I could play video games on my TV. That Atari system cost over $130, and I had enough money to buy one game. So I bought a game that was space-related called Asteroids, and I flew my little rocket around with my joystick and destroyed asteroids.
I use a pencil and paper because I usually like making my own games.
Well, we didn't really have video games when I was a child, and pretty much it was get outside until the lights came on. And that means everybody on the block came outside and we stayed outside until the street lights came on. And we would play games like Kick the Can and Spud and Manhunt.
I use either a computer, a iPhone, or any kind of gaming console.
My family was obsessed with video games, and we had the Atari 2600 and the 7800, where it was this big, you put your cassette into it, and then your controller had a joystick and one single button. It was awesome. Little Pac-Man, Raiders of the Lost Ark, good stuff.
I usually use an iPad and sometimes a computer, but that's all I use.
I played on two things, a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo when that came out, and a Game Boy, which doesn't look like what you guys had now. It's a big, thick gray thing with a little tiny screen in black and white.
This video, along with other items, is going to be placed back in the time capsule to be opened in 25 years from now, which will be the year 2040. In order to save the wonderful memories from Haas School, former and current students were interviewed. Here's some of their memories of Haas School.
Describe what you remember the school looking like.
One other thing that you guys might not know, and actually your teachers might not know either, was actually we had an outdoor classroom in the middle of the Hawes Woods. If you walk out by your parking lot behind the school and walk into the woods, about 50 yards or 100 yards in, we had an outdoor classroom. And we used to actually go into the woods and learn about nature, and we would teach science and different things, and it was really, really fun.
Haas never seemed like a school to me even. It seemed like somewhere that was just bigger than anything could be, where anything was possible and we could literally learn to do whatever we wanted.
There were no walls, they had movable walls, so a lot of the classrooms were joined together. Like my 5th grade class, 2 classes were in the room at one time.
Remember the orange bricks especially, and the entryway looking the same. And on the inside, I remember that the music room and the caf and the gym were all in the same place that they are today, but now they've added some more rooms to the school.
I remember these 2 hallways, and they were 2 really long hallways, and one of them, the floor was blue. And there were these motion detectors on the ceiling, and during lunch, everyone would run by and see if the lights would go off and try and fool the motion detectors.
The front of the school was the kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and there seemed to be an addition on the back of the school, which was 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I remember in 5th grade, my homeroom shared with another room, so the walls were taken down in the middle, so it was like a huge classroom.
Remember that there was a big mural right next to the gym when you first walked in, and that was really the first thing that you saw. And it showed all different kinds of people doing a bunch of different things, but the most part, they were all together and they were friends.
I think the school was a little bit smaller, and I have a big addition on, and there was also more kids in the class. There was probably 30 kids in each classroom.
Well, the school was pretty new, so I don't remember there being a lot of grass around the school. And we used to play outside on the monkey bars and the jungle gym, and it was pretty dusty because it was new.
I remember the back parking lot was probably about 3 times bigger than it is now. When I was in school, they had painted like a huge human body in paint over the parking lot, and I remember it was really neat to be able to play kickball and run around and look down and see which parts of the body you were on.
I remember doors being on the outsides to all of the classrooms, and that's how we would go into the classroom. You'd line up outside and you'd walk in, and you can still see remnants of those doors as you go down into the upper grade wing. You can see where there used to be a door and now there's a window there. Describe what you remember a typical day being like in the classroom.
But I remember Miss Doyle, who was Mrs. Rauph's mom, she would give the morning announcement. She worked in the main office at the time. And I saw Miss Doyle I guess it was a year ago at this point, picking pumpkins with my family. And that voice still, to this day, brought me back to being a student at Haas, because I heard her voice every single morning giving the morning announcements.
We did a lot of handwriting. I remember that as being a big thing. And when I went to school in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we rotated for subjects. So we had a different teacher for all the different subjects rather than having just one teacher all day, which was kind of cool and different.
Dr. Holly was my last teacher there. She was a 4th grade teacher. She taught us computers, I remember. That was our first exposure to working with a computer. It was an Apple IIc or something. She taught us how to use commands, I think it was like logo or something, and how to make a little triangle move forward or to the left, and just had us learn how to do that with the keyboard.
But I definitely remember there being a lot of textbooks and a lot of workbooks that we had to work through. Reading was always through this big textbook, and there were different colors for different levels.
We would be dropped off. I think we were dropped off along this road here, and head into class. We'd get attendance taken and start our lessons, go off to our special.
Well, everybody had their own desks and everything, and teacher would be up at the front talking, writing on the blackboard. There was always recess. Everybody looked forward to that.
I do remember getting graham crackers and milk for our morning break, and that was a big deal back then, was to get picked for the day to go down to Uncle Bob's office and pick up milk and graham crackers.
What do you remember most about the school?
I remember most all the creative, exciting activities we got to do. Space Week started back when we were here. We had things like Japanese Week, the International Fair. We did a gymnastics show every year with Mr. J in the gym.
I remember you always wanted to be picked to go and clean the erasers down in Uncle Bob's office and to make the dittos.
And we actually knew Henrietta Hawes. They used to bring her every year for her birthday to the school. And she was a lovely, lovely woman, and she was so nice, and we'd all sing happy birthday to her. She was 98 years old, and we were so excited. We couldn't believe we were going to actually get to know somebody who was 100 years old. And unfortunately, she died. And boy, we were all so sad. We were sad because we really liked her, but we were also sad because we really, really, really wanted to know somebody who was 100 years old.
Mr. Dunn, 45. Mr. J.
Space Week!
Yep, Mr. J.
Mr. J. Mr. Jenkins. Second grade space mission. Yeah, it was a great time.
I remember that there was a dress code, and we couldn't have hair down below our ears. We had to wear a shirt with a collar and shoes, and we were allowed to wear sneakers at gym.
There's a really cool woods, we would call it the woods, Hawes Woods, down beyond the school, and they had a place called the Turtle Pond down there. I'm not sure if that's still there, but it's sort of a swamp. And we would go after school and ride our bikes down there.
I became fascinated with space because of Space Week at Hawes, and I loved learning about the stars in the planetarium. In 1996, Comet Hyakutake passed by Earth, and the Hawes teachers organized a comet viewing at night on the lower field. I'll never forget that.
There's quite a few things. Space Week, for one thing, is always something I look forward to every year. International Night, that was always fun for me and my parents to come see all the other cultures that were present at the school and in the community. I also remember recess, playing football in any field, any patch of grass where we could play, playing foursquare in the back parking lot.
Most about Hawes are the teachers, the caring community, the students. I'm fortunate enough to have lifelong friends from people I grew up with in kindergarten, and to this day we're still very close. Growing up in the lawns, everybody knew each other. I remember many of my teachers, from my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Winter, to Mr. Taraboki, the principal, to Mrs. Brooker, Mrs. Singer.
Was that every year, if we take a look on my Hawes wall, was when we would all put our Space Week shirts on, and we would make a shape using our bodies, and then Mr. O would go into a cherry picker and would take a picture of us. And it was really sunny, and it hurt your eyes to look up, but you would do it anyway because you knew that that picture was going to be amazing.
I remember Space Week, and I'll never forget it because this is a 5th grade t-shirt that my friend made, and throughout all the different grades we got to go on different missions and do all these things for Space Week.
I remember the most about the school in International Fair. I was the cover of the 2012 cover, and International Fair was pretty fun because there's a lot of food and candy to eat.
Are you still friends with anybody you went to school with?
Not only am I friends with people I went to Hawes with, I actually go to school with people I went to Hawes with now, and which is kind of fun because we've been, I guess, going to the same school since we were 5. So what's that, 17 years of going to the same school?
Jeff and I have known each other since first grade, when we were attending Hawes School in, I think, 1969, 70. And we've been friends for a long time. We've got many other friends that we keep in touch with that still live in Ridgewood or in the New Jersey area.
Absolutely. With technology, it's pretty easy nowadays. In fact, in 2013, we celebrated Mr. J's retirement by having an alumni gym class. So we brought back a whole bunch of 30 and 40 somethings, and at the end of the gym class it was pretty evident that Mr. J was still in better shape than all of us.
My 7 best friends to this day, and I'm a sophomore in college, are the 7 kids that I grew up and went to school with at Henrietta Hawes Elementary. They're the same kids that were in my kindergarten class with Mrs. Bodart, that were in my 3rd and 4th grade class with Miss Bird, that ran in gym and did the mile with Mr. J. All these relationships were formed while going through elementary school. Being a Hawes Duck is something of great pride to every single one of us, and we all look back fondly on the memories that we formed there.
A lot of the same friends that I have now, I met back in Hawes School, and I always say I'm very lucky to have found such a strong group of friends back in elementary school that have lasted through all these years.
I met my 2 best friends in the world at Hawes School. We've been friends since kindergarten and still talk all the time about all the fun we had there.
Absolutely. I've been friends with them for over 25 years, and I'm sure I'll be friends with them for the next 50. They're the very best friends I have in the entire world, and I cherish every day that I've known them, and I'm proud to have met them at Hawes.
Actually, a few years ago, I went to visit Hawes School, and I stopped by one of the classrooms where a close friend of mine is actually a teacher now at Hawes. And when I walked in, he told all the students, everybody, look, this is someone who I went to school with at Hawes School since kindergarten, and we're still close friends to this day. So each of you should look around the classroom, see who's next to you, and you may find that some of you are still friends 20 or 25 years later.
When you went to school here, were there ducks in the courtyard?
That was one of the greatest things about Hawes School. I remember the yearly trek from the courtyard through the back parking lot when the duck family would be going through into the woods. I also remember one year Sesame Street came by and filmed the entire thing happening, and I was hoping and praying that I'd be on air.
Yes, there were. And in 4th grade, there was a whole duck scare because a rumor went around that the ducks weren't there and that there wasn't going to be that whole duck walk, but it happened.
No, not yet. I think they're super cute though now.
And every year they would walk the halls of our school, and I remember in kindergarten and 1st grade I was really, really scared because I thought that they were gonna like jump on my lap and like peck me. I know it sounds really weird, but I swear it happened.
You know, I was there for 6 years, and my siblings have basically been there since I left, and I've never once seen the ducks.
I don't remember any ducks in the courtyard, no.
The only duck that I remember being in the courtyard was on a big steel spring, and we would sit on it and we would rock back and forth on recess.
What's the biggest difference between now and what you remember then?
I think to me the biggest thing that stands out being different is the playground. When we went there, there was a tire playground, which was awesome. The only bummer was on the ground were rocks instead of wood chips. So when you fell, it hurt.
I remember then that we used to have open classrooms where you could move the walls, and so you could make one classroom or make 2 classrooms come together to be one.
I know they got a rock climbing wall there now, and the fields are quite a bit different from what we remember. When we first started, it was only K through 3 or K through 4. We went to Somerville School for 4th and 5th grade, and then came back to Hawes after the expansion was completed to become the first 6th grade graduating class in 1975. In some ways it's changed, but in some ways it stayed the same.
there is no difference for me between the Hawes I remember and the Hawes that I know exists. I know that my two siblings, Tenley Shore, Taverty Shore, view Hawes as their home, as their place where anything is possible and they can learn whatever they want to learn, and that the future is bright. So there is no difference. Hawes is my home, just like it's been my siblings' home, just like it'll be home for people generations to come.
I don't know what's different at Hawes today than it was when I went to school, but I know one thing that's not different is the spirit of the teachers. Students, we grow older, we come and go. Even some teachers, they come and go and they get older. But I think the spirit of allowing kids to imagine, allowing them to have fun, making sure that they're learning and advancing themselves, the spirit of the teachers has been strong at Hawes for the past 50 years, and I'm sure it'll grow even stronger in the next 50.
Here is what we think the school might be like 25 years from now in the year 2040.
I think instead of people who are teachers, I think there'll be robots as teachers.
I think the students here will all be gone, and they'll have maybe robots for teachers.
I think there'll be more classrooms and more specials.
I think Hawes will be more high tech, have more upgraded smart boards, have more computers.
It's going to be more like technologies and stuff like that.
How?
Like, we're going to use more computers and phones and stuff like that.
That brings our video to a close. We want to thank all current, past, and future students and teachers for their hard work and caring personality.
To Hawes, to space, and to every day a new discovery. Hawes is number one. Hawes is number one. Carry from you to you. Okay. Friends and memories are made. Memories going to 5th grade. Hawes is number one. Hawes is number one.
Once a duck, always a duck. Quack, quack.